What's up, guys? Today we're going to go over Arms Warrior for the start of the Dragonflight Season 1 of PvP. We're going to go over talents, recent nerfs and buffs, what's changed since the last season of Shadowlands, some macros, and I'll leave the timestamps down below so you can skip to whatever section you want to. I'm Erratic Gaming and I create content here on YouTube and over on TikTok, and I also stream over on Twitch 4 days a week. If you find this video helpful, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. We're going to start with talents. I don't want to make this a super long video, so I'm not going to go over every single talent in a lot of detail, but this is how I'm going to start my build. I think you ask a bunch of different warrior players, and there's probably going to be little changes here and there, but I do think this is a good starting point. I do want to go over a couple talents that I think you could look at changing. The first one's going to be Rend. You'd have to give up another talent somewhere here in the talent tree. You could give up Deft Experience. You could give up Juggernaut. There was recently a 15% nerf to Rend, but it may still be very viable. I'm just not sure. I kind of want to see what the playing without it is like, just because it's nice to not have to manage another debuff. But I think this is something that we'll have to look into a little bit further into the season to see whether or not it is needed for play. The one I was talking about you could swap it out for is Juggernaut. I've seen some arguments against it and for it. Juggernaut makes it so that your execute increases the execute's damage dealt by 3% for 12 seconds, stacking up to 15 times. Now, I've heard people say that if you're able to use execute over and over and they're staying below 35%, then you are just going to get a kill anyways. But I think with all the speculation on the new season, I think we're moving away from a very bursty setup, instant kill type meta to one where it's just consistent damage. So I think there will be plenty of cases where your target is sitting at low health, and because you're able to just stack executes and get more and more damage and keep them under 35%, that may net you the kill. I think we'll have to see how much value there is in this talent as the season goes on. But again, I think if you wanted to, you could definitely swap it out for the start. Over here in the warrior talent tree, the only one I can really see you moving around is going to be the Shattering Throw or Wrecking Throw. I do think one of these talents is almost always necessary. Shattering Throw you want to have whenever there's a paladin or a mage. And then you can kind of take Wrecking Throw as a default for anyone else. It's really nice that you can swap out Shattering Throw for Wrecking Throw. And I think for certain classes like maybe warlocks and priests, Wrecking Throw is actually going to be really good because it does 500% more damage to absorb shields. So, you know, even if you have this when there's not anything with any type of bubble or absorb shield, it's just a decent damage dealer that doesn't cost any rage. So this could be used in some situations where you're needing just that one last hit to get a kill and they're running away. That's the one you want to look at. Depending on what you're facing, you're going to want to pick up either Shattering Throw or Wrecking Throw. The rest of this is, I feel like it's pretty standard. If you have any thoughts on maybe what you could change here, I'd love to see them down in the comments. But this is just going to be my default build. And again, I'll leave the import string down in the comments as well so that you can just copy paste it and get your warrior up and going. So next, I kind of want to go over what has changed since Shadowlands. We've lost all of our Covenant abilities and conduits. Some of the Covenant abilities are baked into the talent tree now. The big one is going to be Spear of Bastion. I'm so glad that we still have this ability because this was a very fun ability and it's going to be, you know, super important for kill setups. It does stink that we lost Conqueror's Banner. It was an awesome offensive ability, and then Fleshcraft was an amazing defensive ability that shut down so many kill attempts last season. Another thing that's changed since Shadowlands Season 4 is Berserker Rage. Berserker Rage has always been on a minute cooldown, but there were conduits in Shadowlands that reduced it to 30 seconds, and it felt so good when you're facing a priest and you never had to worry about just instant hitting Berserker Rage. It was just off cooldown every time they feared you. It's on a full minute cooldown now, so priests can actually fear you. You can use it, and then 30 seconds later they can fear you again for a full duration. And being a warrior, not having Berserker Rage to get out of a fear, it feels really weird and really bad. You're gonna have to pay attention to Berserker Rage a little bit more now and not just instant hit it in fears. I feel like you could kind of get by in Shadowlands using it that way, but that's not really the case anymore. The thing that's changed is a lot of the defensive abilities and mobility abilities are now all accessible in the talent tree. If we take a look here, we can get Impending Victory as just a regular cooldown. This is amazing. It gives you a very large heal every 25 seconds. We've got over in the Arms Warrior tree, we've got Fueled by Violence. You're healed by 85% of the damage dealt by deep wounds. That's great. We're going to talk about that a little bit more here in just a minute. And then you've got Bitter Immunity, which is basically the Kyrian potion from last expansion. A very good cooldown that will help you get out of diseases, poisons, and curses. For mobility, we've got Bounding Strikes, which you could pretty much never take last expansion because you'd have to get rid of, I think, just taking like 10% less damage or something like that. I can't remember what the talent tree row it was on, but it's awesome to be able to have Bounding Strike just baseline now. And then we've also got Double Time baseline. Again, amazing. Okay, so next I kind of want to go over some of the recent changes that have happened to both Fury and Arms Warrior that I think bring Arms Warrior up either onto the same level as Fury or even higher than Fury. It looked like coming into the expansion that Fury was just going to 100% be better than Arms, but they have done a lot of shooting changes that may have changed that. So we're going to start with this post from 17 days ago where they increased the damage of Overpower by 25% at all times. They increased the damage of Mortal Strike by 30% per stack, and it was 25. Exhilarating Blows has a chance to reset Mortal Strike or Cleave, increased to 20%. Instead of 15%. Fatal Mark damage increased by 20%. Fueled by Violence now heals for 65% of the damage. There's more on this later. Mortal Strike damage increased by 3.5%. So we just got huge buffs across the board. And that was right at the start of Dragonflight where this initial change came in. Then this was a post from 8 days ago. They increased the healing done by Fueled by Violence for up to 85% from 65%. So even more healing increases. 5 days ago, we got even more buffs to the Arms Warrior. So huge changes to Arms. Mortal Strike's damage is no longer reduced by 30% in PvP. That's absolutely huge. These next two are minor nerfs. Sharpened Blades now increases critical strike damage by 5%. In PvP combat, Martial Prowess now increases Mortal Strike's damage by 15%. Per stack, and PvP combat was 30%. So this kind of cancels this out, but Mortal Strike is now like doing 30% more damage in PvP at all times. You don't have to worry about these stacks. Execute's damage is increased by 25% in PvP combat. This is huge. Again, I think we're going to be moving into a meta that is not as setup and one-shot based. It's going to be a lot more consistent damage, and I think Execute getting buffed like this is going to be huge for Arms Warriors who can just sit there and spam Execute once you're in that range. Rend being reduced, this is part of the reason I took Rend out of my talent tree. I don't know if that's necessarily the right choice. I think we'll have to see as the season goes on. This is kind of a minor nerf. We'll have to see how it plays out to see whether or not Rend is still viable or not. This post is just from a day or two ago, and this is what brings Arms to the level of Fury, in my opinion. Fury got some pretty big nerfs. Gushing Wound damage and healing reduced by 10%. Bloodthirst damage and Bloodbath damage both increased by 1%. So that's for, all instances, PvE and PvP. But then here under PvP, Bloodthirst now restores 2% of your health in PvP combat, was 3%. That's like pretty big with how big that button is. Slaughterhouse now decreases healing by 3% per stack, was 5% by stack. We're going to read these next four all in tandem because they kind of go hand in hand. Slaughterhouse now stacks up to 12 times, was 8 times. Slaughterhouse duration increased to 9 seconds, was 6 seconds. Slaughterhouse duration is no longer refreshed when adding stacks. This is the big thing right here, okay? So first of all, the maximum you can stack Slaughterhouse's healing reduction to is 36% when it used to be 40%. And you also used to get it up to that 40% really quick because it just took, I believe it only took 2 rampages to get that full healing stack duration out. Now it takes 3 rampages within 9 seconds, and adding the new stacks of the healing debuff does not refresh the duration. So if you're able to hit 3 rampages right in a row, which isn't necessarily possible, except for maybe when you're in Recklessness or something like that, you're really only going to have 4.5 seconds of a 36% healing reduction. This is a huge nerf to Fury. Honestly, them adding a healing debuff to Fury is what brought them up to the level that they were at during Season 3 and Season 4 of Shadowlands. And I think this is not knocking them all the way down, but this is knocking them off quite a bit. Next, we're just going to go over some basic macros. I'm not, a huge crazy macro user, but I'm going to show you what I do have, and I'll post some of these down in the comments. I do like to have a macro for intervene. You can do this with either the arena target frames, or you can hard macro players' names into the macros. That's how I do it. I prefer if I don't have to think about who my intervene is going to hit, so I hard macro the players' names in that I'm going to be playing with for that session. But I would say if you want to be a little bit more pro about it, you would just macro it to the target frames in game. You need a focus pummel. Just cast target equals focus pummel. This is super important so that you're not having to switch targets to interrupt. Any pro player will tell you that that's almost necessary. Same thing for storm bolts. I do have these actually macroed to the target frames in arena. So I have one for 1, 2, and 3. That'll save you a lot of time and effort when you're trying to interrupt or stun or to CC someone. The one thing I would mention is to put a cancel or a bladestorm. Either just macro that to an ability that you can hit really quick, or put it into some abilities. I like to put it into pummel because I want to have the ability to interrupt if I'm bladestorming. So it kind of looks like this. I'll hit this bladestorm, and then if I hit pummel, it'll just immediately stop my bladestorm and hit the pummel button. So I'm not having to deal with waiting for bladestorm to end to hit pummel. There's a couple other macros you might consider. Spear Bastion is one. You might want to do it at your cursor. I like having to drag it just because of the fast-paced gameplay in arenas. I don't always know that I have my cursor in the right spot, but I would say it's probably a little bit more efficient to have it at cursor if you can handle that. The other thing I do want to mention is a setting that I found super annoying since the pre-patch dropped, and that is press and hold casting. If you have this checked and you try to use abilities like Heroic Leap, if you don't let go of the keybind immediately, like if you don't hit the keybind really quick and let go, it will cast the ability as you're moving your cursor to where you want to land. I found this super annoying with both Heroic Leap and Spear of Bastion. If it's casting before you're ready for it to cast, it may be that you have this option enabled. So you just want to uncheck this. I would suggest just unchecking it as a warrior. I feel like it's more for casters that need that kind of functionality. But this will let you get your mouse where you need to go, even if you're holding down the button, more than a split microsecond. Lastly, I want to talk about PvP talents. These are going to change a lot depending on what you're facing and who you're playing with, or even just like what kind of playstyle you're wanting to have at the time. These are probably going to be my defaults. Warbanner is so good. It increases your movement speed and reduces incoming CC by 50% to you and all allies. This is a crazy cooldown. It does take some time to get used to using it at the right time, but it is an insane cooldown. Disarm is pretty much needed for any melee class. I won't say any melee class, but definitely against like warriors, rogues, probably ret paladins. You only want to make sure you're not using it against casters and stuff like that, though. Sharpened Blade is like absolutely necessary. This just gives you some extra healing reduction for when you're setting up a kill. It's important that you don't like macro this to Mortal Strike because you want to be able to use it in the right time. But when I first started playing, I did macro it into Mortal Strike, and it works well enough if you have to do that. Some other ones to look at. Warbringer, I love this last expansion, and especially against casters and stuff like that. I would probably move Warbringer in instead of Disarm. That sentence used to be really good, but it has a 6-second cooldown now. So I don't know the viability of it really. Storm of Destruction gives you Bladestorm more often. This can be useful, Bladestorm and Avatar, not just as DPS cooldowns, but as root breakers. If you know you're going to face a lot of roots, this could be a good PvP talent to spec into. The other PvP talents, there might be very niche situations where you'd want to use them, but those are going to be my main picks. And again, this is going to be my default setup right here. So really that's it. If the video helped you out, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and come check me out on Twitch. I'm going to be grinding out Gladiator really hard this season, and I love talking with people and answering your questions if they come up. I'll see you guys in the arenas.